seconds are on a day. Something so small and so little that we often take for granted that there's only 86,400 seconds to make up a day. And in that time frame, 22 veterans have already committed suicide. Statistically, 1.09 veterans kill themselves each hour. That's 660 veterans per month and 8,030 veterans per year. Veterans who suffer from PTSD, whether it's documented or undocumented, commit suicide per day. Although some of the signs are going to notice, it's important for everyone to know some of the said signs and to also check on each and every person that you know that could be suffering from it. I have personally suffered from a form of PTSD that went undiagnosed by the local VA. And it wasn't until my wife pointed it out that I sought treatment. And after I got a formal PTSD screening, it was then that I realized that I was told that I had a form of PTSD called traumatic stress disorder. Today we will be discussing the key points of suicide and PTSD, the different forms of PTSD, statistics of undocumented cases, and treatable methods. Now that you have a complete understanding as to what we'll be discussing, let's start with the many forms of PTSD. There are 5 main types of post-traumatic stress disorder: normal stress response, acute stress disorder, uncomplicated PTSD, comorbid PTSD, and complex PTSD. PTSD comorbid with other psychiatric disorders is much more common than the uncomplicated PTSD. PTSD is generally associated with at least one other major psychiatric disorder. Leading factors also include depression, alcohol and drug abuse, and many other anxiety disorders. There are many different ways a person can develop PTSD, and it's not just limited to the military sector. Examples include serious road accidents, violent person assaults, and examples sexual assault, burglary or mugging, prolonged sexual abuse or sexual neglect, witnessing violent deaths, military combat, hostage situations, terrorist attacks such as 9/11, natural disasters such as Katrina, unexpected severe injury or death to a family member or friend, or diagnosis of a life-threatening condition. With PTSD being the main factor in so many suicides, the VA has attempted to keep a closer eye on key terms and actions on service members, especially with our country dealing with a war that has waged on for over 17 years. PTSD is at a higher rate. Unfortunately, the majority of the time you become aware of a person that is considered undocumented, it is too late. Because the scars of PTSD often manifest behaviorally in many iterations, they can be difficult to recognize and diagnose at first. This is especially true in non-combat cases of PTSD, where friends or family are less aware of the victim's trauma and history of that trauma. People with PTSD have among the highest rates of healthcare service use. People with PTSD often present with a range of symptoms. This cause which may be one of the main reasons why PTSD is overlooked and misdiagnosed, having resulted from past trauma. The annual cost of Society of Anxiety Disorders is estimated to be significantly over $42.3 billion. This includes the psychiatric, non-psychiatric, medical treatment costs, indirect workplace costs, mortality costs, and prescription drug costs. Since the early 1980s, doctors and scientists alike have been aggressively studying this disorder to find a cure. Although PTSD has many forms and the ability to mask itself, it cannot hide its distinct brainwaves and patterns. Trauma-focused psychotherapy is the most common form of treatment for PTSD. Trauma-focused means that the treatment focuses more on the memory of the traumatic event or its meaning. These treatments often use different techniques to help you process your traumatic experience. Some involve visualizing, talking or thinking about your traumatic memory. It helps you peacefully relieve those traumatic experiences and helps ease the pain. Antidepressants, medications have also shown to aid in treating most PTSD symptoms. However, some of those main medications also used for symptoms of depression and anxiety. PTSD is very much an epidemic. And not only is it sweeping across the nation, taking lives of those who have served, it has also claimed many lives of your average American. Medication is available, however, symptoms are often masked by more common illnesses and are more overlooked than it needs to be. And by the time you do recall that you have PTSD, oftentimes it is too late. Although there is help out there for not only citizens of the U.S. and its veterans, most choose to ignore those warnings, only to be left merely a statistic. Thousands of men and women all across this nation answer their country's call to fight for freedom. The military branches spend millions of dollars each year to ensure each and every one of us were fully fit and trained to fight. Not at any time during that stretch of training did they teach us about coping or returning home. And personally, that's been the biggest fight. Thank you.